Hi, everyone. Welcome to the final session in our free e-commerce SEO auditing series, which is is collaboration between Sitebulb and Women in Tech SEO. I'm Jojo. I'm the Sitebulb marketing manager, and we've also got Patrick from Sitebulb who is hanging out in the chat. I would like to welcome this week's awesome trainer, Sophie Gibson. She is Tech SEO Director of Studio Hawk, which is a specialized London-based SEO agency, and customer of Sitebulb. In fact, Sophie has introduced Sitebulb to all three agencies that she's ever worked at, so she's especially amazing in our eyes. Thank you, Sophie. Sophie's a well-known technical SEO specialist and speaker. She's appearing on stage at Brighton SEO and WTS Fest. So we're very lucky to have her sharing her knowledge on auditing site speed and performance today. A reminder that as this training is in partnership with Women in Tech SEO, we ask that you all adhere to the WTS way, which is their code of conduct. A link to that we should be sharing in the chat imminently, so please take time to review that. And if you missed any of the previous sessions in this series, you can find the recording links pinned in the chat. This session will also be recorded, so don't worry if you miss anything. We'll be emailing out a link to the recording tomorrow, so keep an eye out for the email, as it will also include your series certificate. We should have a bit of time at the end of session today for your questions. Please put them into the Q&A tab, which is next to the chat box. Don't put them in the chat itself. They're easier for us to manage in the Q&A tab, and then you can also upvote other people's questions in there if you can't think of any yourself. Full disclosure, Sophie is going to be using Sitebulb a lot during this live audit. So to fully put her training into practice, you might want to give Sitebulb a try. If you're not already a customer, there is a 60-day free trial available for you. And Patrick is going to share that in the chat as well. Okay, let's get to the training. I'm going to disappear now, and I'll see you later on for the Q&A. Don't forget to get your questions in. For Sophie, thank you so much again, Sophie, for doing this. And over to you.
Oh, thanks so much, Joe. Yeah, long time Sitebulb user here. I can't do my job without it. So yeah, today I'm going to run through how to audit site speed and site performance issues using Sitebulb, and just run through a few of the top things to keep in mind and how to set it up. Because when we think about doing a performance audit, it can feel a little bit like being told to scale up a giant mountain. It can seem very intimidating, super daunting, especially if you've not dug into site speed or performance before, because there is a few challenges with kind of performance testing. Number one, I think mostly for SEOs or people like that, we're not developers. We may understand code, but we're not working on it day to day. We might need to know some principles about how it should work, but occasionally it can seem a little bit challenging because if you don't have that initial kind of coding knowledge. So we're not developers, but we still have to advise on actions to fix issues which are going to developers. So we're going to have to be able to write tickets, prove business cases, be able to explain exactly what we want to happen, so we can make sure that the ticket has all of the information that a developer needs in order to be able to action the fix that you've recommended. It's also quite resource intensive, so mainly computing, and generally it takes a lot of mental power to kind of run through all of these pages, try and juggling all of the different aspects that you could update. And also the site size also impacts either the resources needed, the time it takes to be able to actually analyze the pages that you need. So yeah, there's a lot of things in there that can make it seem a little bit intimidating, but hopefully I'm going to be able to break that down for you. So number one, why should we even actually bother focusing on site performance? So there are a few reasons. Mainly, this is a very old study, but it still holds true now. And I know it's not bounce rate anymore, thanks GA4. It's engagement rate, but it's basically the same. It's the opposite. The longer a page takes to load, the more likely user is to disappear and not stay actually on the page at all. So you can lose a lot of customers that just come to the site because they're having a very poor experience. And sometimes even this is could be untrackable. So occasionally in Google Analytics, you'll be able to see how many people have bounced out. But if your site's that slow, tracking scripts aren't loading yet, then you could have a section of site visitors which are not even being accounted for in analytics, but you're missing out on. And more from a UX perspective, but there is for Farfetch did this case study looking at reducing largest contentful paint, which tends to very mainly correlate with kind of site performance, site speed, load speed in general. But they found that every 100 milliseconds that they reduced the LCP time for in Core Web Vitals, they increased conversions by 1.3%. So if you're able to stack up quite a lot of site performance fixes, then that can go ahead to increasing conversions, most importantly for e-commerce website conversions and revenue. But there are a few things that we need to keep in mind when we're setting up an audit for performance analysis, because there's a lot of parts, and as I mentioned, it's quite resource intensive. So there are a lot of things that you might need to tweak that you wouldn't necessarily do when you're setting up a regular crawl. So I'm just going to run through some of the settings and then I'll jump through to the examples. So recommend using the sample audit type, just because that will select a sample of pages across the site itself. So it doesn't crawl every single page, because that can, again, bloat the audit. We just need to know for the majority of pages, we just need to know by page template. We need to make sure we've got enough data to get the metrics that we need, and to know that it's actually that's true across the whole sample of pages. And I would also exclude the query string parameters. So untick crawl parameters, because generally we're not going to be wanting any filter pages appearing in our crawl, because those tend not to be the original indexable canonical URL for those. So I typically turn that off. Also, if you turn on performance and mobile friendly, that will automatically turn on the resources required. And you can also untick the SEO options, so you don't need anything else if you're just looking at running a crawl for this particular purpose. Also, one thing you really want to turn on is the code coverage report. So tick code coverage and untick past technologies. It's useful information generally, but we don't particularly need it because it's going to be resource intensive, because it's going to be pulling Lighthouse scores for all of the pages. We want to try and minimize the amount of computing power that it's going to take, just so our laptops don't sound like they're about to fly off. And depending on the site size, so you may want to run a pre-crawl before, just to get an idea of how big the site is, how it crawls, etc. Maybe 25 to 50% of the pages, or 100% of pages, if you can be sure that it's not going to crawl lots and lots of URLs, which is why I recommend maybe doing a pre-crawl first, just to see exactly what kind of technical health that the site is in. But there are some other options as well. So what we can do mainly I'd recommend for larger sites, or for those technically challenged websites that maybe take a lot of power, or don't have a very good they don't have a very good crawl or information architecture, as in they don't have a common URL pattern, for example, between the different pages. For those, I would recommend using the URL list as the only source. The only downside of this is that you're going to have to manually identify URLs that match the page segments you'd like to analyze. So, for example, collection pages, products, blogs, etc. I would say you could go with about 20 to 40, depending on, again, how large a site is or how accurate you kind of want your averages to be. But I would recommend that, you could increase that if you want to. For this, you want to use audit type standard because we're only crawling the URL list as a source. So just, again, make sure to untick the crawl website option. And then you can gather together your URLs that match those segments, and then you can create a URL list and import that in. And under the Core Web Vitals, because we've manually collected a sample of pages, we can select all URLs for the Core Web Vitals audit section. So I'm going to run through a few things that typically come up, just so we've kind of got a bit of an idea of some of those common things that you will generally see when running site performance issues. I think I'm yet to see a website that doesn't have image lazy loading issues, or the fact it's got giant images. That tends to be one. But yeah, common issues, scripts that are enabled on all pages, when they're only maybe used on one specific template, maybe they're only used on one specific page. Stuff like anything that needs to detect your location. So for example, it needs to find your shipping location. Stuff like Google Maps. If there's a Maps function on one of the pages, but actually Google Maps code is on all of the pages, that's usually a common one. Or social embed codes, because people like to put embed products onto product pages, that kind of integrate the Instagram feed with their product pages so people can link to the specific products that they've shared on Instagram. So those types of code, again, they can also appear on templates that they're not necessarily used on. We'll also find that there's likely to be bloated scripts that actually only use a small amount of code within it. And then font files. Occasionally you will see that where fonts are either not used at all, or they're only used on, certain headings. I think font awesome is a big culprit for this, where people only use 2 symbols using font awesome, but it's actually across all of the site. And then stuff like images that are either too large, not lazy loaded in, or lazy loaded in when they shouldn't be. Those are kind of the common issues that we will tend to see. But what I'm going to do is we're going to dig through some actual real life data shortly. So the main things that we're looking for in this audit before I dive in is we're going to look for page templates that have very high LCP scores or the SCP scores. So the largest or the first contentful paint, those ones tend to kind of correlate with poor site load speeds. So this is in the performance and HTML templates. It makes it super easy to identify what page template is actually the worst. And then also we need to identify code that is unused or only partially used, and we do that during the code coverage. And actually, it's just useful for us to actually have all of the data benchmarked. So from this initial crawl, we can either copy the list of URLs that it crawled, or use our list from before. And once any fixes, hopefully, once we've gone through the process of identifying fixes and putting them to developers, hopefully they will be then able to compare the performance before, after, and then you really have the kind of proof of concept to show all of these fixes or this kind of site performance project, change these metrics, and then you can also compare for the same period with the Google Analytics and revenue and conversion rate, etc. So again, being able to prove afterwards that you had a business case, it actually caused this revenue and it was attributed to the work that you'd done. So let's demonstrate. So I do have a site crawl that I've done previously, which I'm hopefully switching to now. So I won't show you all the settings or the setting up, but that was on the earlier slides. So this will be shared later, so it'll be fine for that. So this is what it will look like if you've got everything turned off except performance and code coverage. So for this, I manually gathered a selection of URLs and tells me how many crawls. So internal 110, it's crawled many resources. And we have our kind of general notes, status codes, etc. I pulled these from the sitemap, so that's hopefully shouldn't be too much of an issue. I like by starting looking at all hints. So usually when I'm running through these, I'm essentially looking at what issues affect 100% of the site. So what are actual site-wide issues? Because it's going to be kind of slightly easier in terms of resources. If you can find something which is just in the main template and turn that off, it's going to have a bigger impact than if it only affected a small amount of pages. So thankfully, a lot of these have learned more about these hints, which is super useful because maybe it's an issue that you've not heard of or you've not come across before. There's actually some really helpful guidance in there. I think I've said in multiple webinars before, but I think about 50% of my technical SEO knowledge came from the discovering issues on site using Sitebulb and then finding the related documentation about the specific hints and why it might be happening. So generally, this one's stopping the render of things. I did a talk a while back at both Women in Tech and Last Brighton around the order of the code in the head actually impacts how stuff loads in. So you might be inadvertently blocking stuff with how scripts are ordered. So that's something to look into for that. And generally just say the stuff is slow. And as I mentioned earlier, deferring images, that is showing me that common issue is there. 100% of pages, a lot of pages are actually showing loading in all of the images before people actually scroll to them. So that is a good improvement. So that's across the site. So they might be specific to a page template, but I'll show you digging into how you can kind of segment this for a bit of easier analysis. So this is just useful to get a general idea of what the main issues across the site are. Like I said, 100%. Those ones, a lot of images that could be resized. Again, this could be kind of a more manual job if you were to go in and do that, or maybe they just need to use a different compression algorithm if they have those kind of things set up. Now, stuff like remove unused CSS and remove unused JavaScript. These are scripts that are not being used, and this is where the code coverage report comes in super handy. And I will show you that shortly. But yeah, looking through all of these, what are 100%, what's actually impacting cross-site? Super useful just to get an overview of the different types of problems, so you're able to like dig a little deeper into those. Because if we go into our actual performance tab, we've got an overview here which talks about just specifically this. Again, got some nice visuals to show where the main issues are. But what I love in this is the HTML template section. Now, this jumps into categorizes all the pages based on whether or not it's got a similar page. So it groups together page URLs that have very similar HTML or kind of are templated that way. And in here, what I like to do is you can sort all of these. So I like to sort by LCP, so what is the highest one there? And then how many pages are related to that. So this content page 2, I can also view what URLs are actually linked to that, so I know what page template that belongs to. But actually 2 pages, that's high score, but that might be more manual change, or it's not going to have as much impact to change if we do fix that, versus product category pages, which have 36 URLs assigned to it. That also has quite a high score in that area. So I can just confirm, I can view what URLs are actually causing this issue. It comes up with all the different metrics here, different resources, etc., how many files. You can see that there's a lot of scripts on here, so that gives us an inkling of what types of issues we might find. A lot of sizes, could be a lot. So images might not be so bad. This page specifically might be a little bit worse in terms of images, but at least from we can see that these are collection pages. So any kind of changes that we want to do, we want to assess on that particular template, because that's potentially more important than fixing the kind of other issue that only had two particular pages assigned to it. So I'm going to run through, so on the performance, here we go back to HTML templates. So I know collection pages are probably one of the ones that I want to dig into. Another good thing, when you view the URLs here, you can actually click on the performance data, and it will show you what hints have been set up, have been like recommended from Lighthouse on here. So this is the opportunities and the diagnostics here. So kind of essentially from the information that you get from Lighthouse, but directly in Sitebulb. Again, it's great to see that we can see a lot of on-screen images here that need to be deferred. Maybe, I think a lot of it is cross-referencing the number of pages that it affects, and also the amount of kind of file size that's actually being transferred. Because if you can find something which is across a lot of pages or specific to one particular page template and is very high in kind of reducing the amount of data that is sent over, that's going to be miles more impactful getting fixed than it would be if it's slightly smaller. But at the same time, little small things that are quite easy to implement. So maybe it's a really small script or something that you can identify as actually is not used on all of the pages. You can remove that, and it potentially wouldn't take much time. It may only save a small amount of data that are being transferred, but that's one less thing. And once you start stacking kind of those smaller, easy tasks together, you can show the value of like a big group of things. Like, here's these 5 scripts that are actually not used whatsoever. Hopefully, it will be a smaller task for the development agency to take out those specific scripts than it would be, for example, trying to take some code out of one script and creating a custom one, which they might need to do for other things. But yeah, great for looking at these. So unused CSS, unused JavaScript. You can see here what's kind of being wasted here. But actually, I really love looking at this information within the actual code coverage screen. So I will jump to that shortly. So let's go back. So on the code coverage, this is where it has all of the information about the script and how they're being loaded in and how much is being wasted. So you've got 2 tabs, CSS coverage and JavaScript coverage. I think CSS generally, you might find has less of an impact just because file sizes can be a little bit smaller, but it's still definitely worth looking at. So again, I like looking at what percentage of stuff is wasted completely. So on all of 110 pages that we looked at, this particular CSS file has not been used. So that can be safely removed. Might need testing just in case it happens to be on a different page that we didn't sample, but at least we know in general, across the pages that we sampled, this script is not used. small saving, but hopefully it's an easy ask. So now I want to maybe come down and have a look if there is any, just resize this. I don't know if I'm just not seeing the bottom of it. I think that's everything. So yeah, cross-referencing what is here on the kind of unused kilobytes. So this one, for example, is 89% of the code is being wasted here. And we can easily see what that code specifically is. So if there's not anything that you can just be like, this script is not loaded in anywhere, take this off, you'll be able to go into the, in here, if you click on the hamburger and go to code wastage, it will show you a list of all of the code that is actually not used whatsoever in here. So looking through all of this, there is a lot of stuff that is actually not used at all. So you can compare these. I think this is pretty much, as I mentioned, this script can go completely because it doesn't actually have anything in common. But this will show you what lines are used, which lines are not used. So you can easily put together a ticket saying, this is the exact piece of code which is being used or isn't being used, depending on how big each section actually is. So hopefully a development agency will be able to just update the CSS file, remove the code that's not being used, and that will automatically save a bunch of time. Okay, it's full screen. Here we go. So yeah, this is super useful for that. I think there wasn't a lot of stuff in the other ones. So yeah, it tells you exactly how much is unused and how much you'll be able to save, which is hopefully will tell you the more impactful that will be. But in general, it's the JavaScript which is the worst offender. So looking at all of this information, we can see again which JavaScript is not used across a lot of these and what the biggest times of file size. Now I'm immediately looking down at these. This file particularly might be worth doing because it's 25 kilobytes. We can also sort by the amount of unused, but this portable wallet page is not using 150 kilobytes, so that's a kind of quite a lot in terms of file size. Again, it's about 60% of that file is actually not being used in any of the loading process for the pages we've looked at. And again, we can go to the code. Oh, this is quite long. We can go in here and see if there's any particular pieces of page. Again, this will come up with in red for anything that's not used. And then we can prioritize based off of that. So maybe these 3 pages, these 3 scripts are the biggest ones that we might want to look at. Now, there's a few kind of things in this. I know, for example, Trekkie, this is how Shopify does their internal analytics. So we're not actually able to change this particular code. But I think some of this knowledge will kind of come through familiarity with the kind of CMS that you're using. But at least we'll be able to group together all of the issues, what we've got, and bearing in mind looking at all of the performance metrics, what we've got there, we can identify kind of those main key things that will probably affect the biggest amount of page templates that have the worst impact. And we can go down from there. So for example, maybe I've written up my technical ticket for implementing lazy loaded on those collection pages. Then I want to maybe start on the next worst page with an amount of issues. So for example, product category, those ones are also quite probably 39 in there, or there's 30 URLs on the product. So I can view those ones. And again, these products are the ones that have some issues. We can check the performance data. So we don't have to redo a Lighthouse audit. So some high opportunity, add dimensions to images, defer off-screen images, it's always images. And then maybe they could be impactful for site speed, but could be a lesser priority. I'd say for these templates, we'll be looking at how can we compress those images, or how can we reduce the file size of those images before they get uploaded. And again, if you click in, it will give you all of the files, how they're actually loaded in. So we should have all the information that we'll need to be able to put together a technical ticket on that. And I said for the code coverage, we can identify all of the different pages that we've got wasted code on. So hopefully we'll then have a list of pages of scripts specifically that we can take off. And then we can have a list of potential fixes that we might need to do. Now we've kind of narrowed down to our list of, here's all of the particular page templates, here's the number of pages that it's going to be affecting, and this is the range of issues that we have spotted on each page. Now we'd really want to see what is actually worth doing and what might either be able to wait, or what doesn't have as much impact on site speed that we might need to be mindful of. So once we've hopefully got together our initial lists, again, we can pull out some audit notes, or we've got our list of hints. So main list of issues, and then we've got a list of particular page templates which have the most URLs with problems. They will then be able to come on to the kind of estimating the size or the effort required for actually trying to fix these issues. So how on earth do we get this list of many issues that we might have spotted into a nice, neat, prioritized list? So I am going to run through the different ways that we can test that. So let me just switch back over. And I think that's it. So now what? Now what? We've got our information, we've got all of our issues. What do we do now? So now what I want to go and do is go through and actually test to see if my fixes work and impact the Lighthouse scores or the load speed times on there. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. So there's a thing called resource blocking that you can use in DevTools. So now we've got our URL. So we've got our example URL. Let's take a collection page, for example. We can open DevTools, run a Lighthouse test. And if we go into the network tab, you can right click on the script. So bearing in mind, we had a look earlier, we can turn off that product wallet script. We can maybe turn off that Trekkie script if we wanted to, even though we can't remove it. We can try stopping these resources from loading entirely. And then we just need to right click, block the request URL, and then reload and rerun the Lighthouse audit. And from that, you'll be able to get two different metrics that will kind of show you the change in how many seconds that's taken off or how many milliseconds that's taken off. And we can actually use this difference in the scores to then calculate the conversion rate increase. And then we can calculate the revenue difference that could potentially come from fixing that, because there's nothing that motivates businesses to implement fixes. It's showing, is it value? Getting in, showing the actual value of that. So they've got a monetary amount, thinking about if they want to allocate development resources to that fact, is it going to be worth it for them? So the second option is using local overrides. Now, this is a little bit more technical, but there is an option that you can use within DevTools called local overrides, and you create a new folder, which you're going to create a new piece of website for. So bear in mind, knowing what we know around the various scripts that are loading in the site, what we can do is we can replace the script that has all of the code in it and replace it with our own version based off of the code wastage report. And we can pull that information out and just put that part into the page and remove the other script entirely. So we're basically replacing that on your local machine so you can test it yourself. So you just need to right click it. You need to find the file that's got it on there. It's usually the index file is the main, or has all of the site HTML in there. You remove the scripts or files identified on that particular page template, and you can save it, and you can again rerun Lighthouse and record the changes. So this is kind of a bit more involved, but I did run through the exact process of how to use local overrides in my last Brighton SEO talk in October, called Where's Your Head At? So this is specifically talks about replacing the head for testing moving pieces of code around, but the same principle applies for any kind of override or any kind of change you want to make and test out a new piece of code, a new fix, because you can use this for fixing almost everything. You can add lazy loading to all of the images, perhaps. You can add new scripts, you can take scripts away, and see the impact by retesting on Lighthouse. So how are we going to kind of prioritize our issues? Mainly, we want to try and focus on fixes that impact revenue driving page templates. So for example, in the site that I was showing, if it actually showed that the blog pages were the biggest kind of issue in terms of images, load speeds, etc., it might not be as big of a priority because those are not directly revenue related pages. So we might want to deprioritize them. They might still be important. We want our target market to come and read and engage with our content, because as I showed earlier, people will just move away if it takes too long to load. But if we're wanting to focus on driving traffic to the pages that really matter, those revenue driving pages are really going to be the ones that we want to focus on. So product pages, collection pages, homepage, etc. I'd also try and prioritize performance issues that affect 100% of pages covered, because this means there's a site-wide issue, and if you fix that one site-wide thing, it will impact across the whole entire website. So again, that's looking at the kind of the scale of things, stuff that is going to be one fix and applies to a larger scale is going to be potentially worth doing more than a smaller fix, which only affects 25% of the site. I'd also, again, look at pages that have the highest core vitals metrics on average, because then those are likely to be the problem areas. And let's integrate testing to calculate revenue metrics from the fixes and prioritize those actual high value fixes. So, like I mentioned, product category, these are the ones I'd probably want to prioritize. It's a revenue driving page. There's a large percentage of pages that are actually in that category. So hopefully any specific fixes that I can make that are going to impact the product category pages are going to have a much better impact across that subsection of pages, especially if it's got a high percentage. There's probably going to be a lot more product pages across the full site than there are collection pages, for example. So again, we can use that information to make sure we're prioritizing the right areas. Because when we're looking at it's kind of a bit of a matrix, there's a lot of things we need to take into account. So generally there's stuff that we'll be looking at stuff in this kind of dev support function, because we're not really going to be able to do a lot ourselves unless your site is using stuff like Google Tag Manager that you have access to, which you can turn on and off scripts in there. But it kind of requires that. So anything that's kind of low complexity, it might take a little bit more resource because it needs development support, but it should still be template level tweaks, single line code changes, and stuff that's going to be larger in scale, as in, impacts the whole site, because those are just easier to both get done. It doesn't take much development effort on that side, and affects a larger proportion of pages, versus stuff like maybe code refactoring. So while we can show what areas of code is being wasted, there might be some pieces which are more complex to do it actually in practice, and we need, would take a lot of development time and be quite high in the complexity. We might not want to focus on those types of issues because they're going to be just much harder to actually get over the line, may take longer, etc. So I wanted to discuss a bit about actually, so it's all well and good saying, we can calculate the revenue increase on that, but I thought I'd quickly run through how I calculate that revenue increase, so we can actually attach that monetary value to those fixes that we want to do. So this is related to kind of like our testing. So as I mentioned before, we should have tested our, turning that script off, for example, and we've got a before and an after. And we just need to see what the difference is between those. So for this 8.3 seconds or 8,300 milliseconds. So back to our first initial stat. So looking at case studies for this, there might be some more recent ones. I think this one's not super old, but if you can find a stat that has a case study to back it up, use that. But for this particular case, they found a 1.3% increase every 100 milliseconds. So if we take that number, we've got our speed change in milliseconds. We've got to divide by 100 because every 100 milliseconds is a 1.3% increase. So we need to know how many times of 1.3% do we need. Now, if anyone knows, I did actually spend too long pulling my hair out over the numbers here, but if anyone who wants to tell me if this is correct, please do, and I will happily update it. But this is how I worked it out. So I worked out 1.3 is a decimal, it's 0.013, and I want to multiply that. So we've got 83 times this 1.3% conversion rate increase. So this gets me to 1.079. So I'm going to take my current existing conversion rate for traffic, add on the percentage increase of the fix that would make me, and then from that I get my new conversion rate, which I've rounded. So this should mean that the new conversion rate will be 2.8% after this particular fix has been done. So at, for example, a £30 average order value, traffic that was worth £5,700 is now worth £11,850 based on the new conversion rate and how much traffic they get. So that means that this particular fix, or the fix that you're looking at, could increase revenue by 6,150. So this is per month as well. So you'll be able to go, here's the ticket, here's the value of how much I think this is worth to you as a business. So they can then best prioritize which ones go through, and how to order these, which one gets done first, hopefully the one that has the biggest revenue impact. You do have to be a little bit mindful of using these numbers, of course, especially if we're not using our conversion driving pages and the changes of those. But in general, it's still a good rule of thumb. It's going to be an estimate anyways. We can't really say that this will exactly change the conversion rate by this amount. But we've got an estimate on here. We can show our working, and you can then size up the kind of projects. If you've got loads of small files, but they're on a tip, small tasks that don't actually have that much of an impact on their own, again, group those together, especially if they're kind of similar. So you can be like, here's the image issues, and these issues as a whole group would be worth this amount. So then again, it's easier to prioritize these individual projects. And again, just really good for getting your fixes actually done, because again, there's nothing more exciting than convincing, should I say, than an actual revenue number attached to the fixes, because we get that a lot. Like, actually, how does this help us? What's it worth to us? I can't get resource. Should I? Can you put a business case together for me? And if you go already with that, it helps with prioritization and getting it done. So let's recap. So what do we need to do? We need to determine the crawl settings required, make sure we set up our performance test with the right settings, use our code coverage report to find scripts which are not used on the site at all or waste a lot of code, prioritize those site-wide scale issues and issues that cover 100% of a specific page template, test the impact of your changes using those local overrides or the resource blocking within DevTools, and then calculate that revenue impact to put together a business case to get those tickets actually implemented. So yeah, that's everything from me. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Sophie. That was awesome. As expected, so much value there. Our Sitebulb Cloud customer, Arnout Hellemans, is going to be delighted with your code coverage analysis. He's always trying to get SEOs to assess and remove unused code. Personally, I loved the link back to revenue and actually calculating it because, and the value of fixes, that's what it's all about, right? So we have got a few minutes left for questions, and we have had some come in, Sophie. So we'll just see how many we can get to. Okay. I think if I just do that.
Absolutely.
So, okay. The first one is from Drishti. So does the CMS and JavaScript framework we use have an impact on site speed?
So I'd say yes, generally because there's usually specific ways that particular frameworks put together stuff, which means issues are more common in certain CMSs over other ones. But then again, it's still the same process to do the fixes, and just because there's so many variables of why you can't necessarily say one CMS is better for site speed over the other. I think on average, yes, particularly, but I know there's so much other stuff that goes into the impact. So, for example, Shopify is not necessarily a CMS thing. It can be how the theme is put together. I think that has a really big impact, like the actual styling and the code put on that, stuff like external tracking as well, that and the images used, that has probably a higher proportion of impact on site speed, which is not necessarily dependent on CMS only. It's the people putting the information in the CMS, the person uploading the files that haven't compressed them first. It's the theme that the theme design, which actually hasn't been optimized, rather than the actual CMS itself.
Okay. All right. Cool. Now let's have another look. So, this one is also from Drishti. If a particular page in a subfolder has low mobile page speed, is there a possibility that all pages in the subfolder are facing that issue?
I mean, yeah, probably. I've not seen many issues that are generally just refined to one particular page, except the homepage. I think that's sometimes a different egg, but yeah. Thankfully, you can test this with the site performance stuff. You can select a sample of those URLs to make sure that is this an issue that's actually represented across the majority of these pages or not, because then you've got the actual proof on average what is the kind of load speeds. You might find some specific page outliers. Again, what I like to do is go by biggest page resource. You can sort in Sitebulb, or once you've exported the data, and you can see what is the one single page which disproportionately has the worst scores, and maybe you can just do some small tweaks on that one particular page and have an impact on there. But generally, we wanting to make site-wide changes at scale. So yeah, that segmentation and making sure you've got enough pages to actually sample that. I think once you've discovered, maybe if you're doing manual audits first, if you discover, oh, this page looks to be worse in comparison to maybe collections or the homepage, then from that knowledge you've gathered through that data, through looking around, you can then start running the performance test on those particular pages.
Okay. All right, we've got one here from Linnea, which Patrick has. I've seen he's dropped a few comments in there. So when I check site speed performance with Sitebulb on desktop, I'm concerned about how much my own computer and connectivity influence the results. Have you ever thought about this, Sophie? So Patrick says he agrees it's a legitimate concern, although probably not worth worrying too much about it. A tool like Sitebulb's designed to give you a directional insight into which metrics are the worst offenders. It won't have any impact on the hints. Your connection can have an impact, but this happens on all tools. So similarly, if you hit the same page multiple different times with page speed insights, you'll see variations in the results. Okay, and this is because things like server load differ from one moment to the next, which oh my goodness, he's written so much information here, which affects page performance. Okay, cool. And then, so for anybody else who's interested in this topic, Patrick has also dropped a link there for more information. So Sophie, do you anything to add or?
I think the only minor thing that I might want to be aware of is if a website, for example, doesn't use a CDN, and if you're assessing a US-based site when you're in the UK or somewhere which is not your original location or is quite far away, just be mindful that that might not necessarily be indicative of the particular person's in that location experience. But again,
Right.
you can actually cross-reference when in Search Console if you're actually already working with the client, and you can see what countries specifically or which page templates have the most number of issues with that. So yeah, you can kind of mitigate that a little bit.
Okay, yeah, good point. Here's another one about, you just mentioned CDNs. How do CDNs help boost site speed? Can you elaborate?
Generally, this is stuff like any resources. Generally, they're used for images, but anything hosted on CDN essentially makes the server that it comes from, make sure it's as close to that user's actual location as possible. So, for example, without a CDN and a website server is based in the US from the UK, it's going to take longer time for that signal to reach me as a user in here as if somebody was, sat in the same state, for example. So having a CDN, what it does, it detects where you're from and then chooses a cached version, usually, of where that a location of those files that's on a server that is closer to you, therefore has that a small amount of impact on that data getting to you a bit quicker.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for that. We've got another one here which Patrick has kind of helped to answer. So where does the core Web Vitals data come from in this example? Can Sitebulb pull data from the page speed insight or Crux API? So Patrick's written it's lab data. It's collected by running Lighthouse scripts locally using headless Chrome whilst Sitebulb crawls. So just again, for anybody else interested in the answer to this one, Patrick has dropped another link to some more information in the comments on that question. Do you want anything to add, Sophie?
No, that's just where it comes from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Anything to add? No. Cool. So, I mean, we've got Drishti had another question here, but I feel like you kind of answered this one in your presentation.
Yeah, that code wastage report is going to be worth its weight in gold for you if you want to identify those bloated scripts that only use a small bit. Like I said, you can drill down by page template and see what is actually necessary. Is it used on all the pages? Can I get rid of it? Can I just take the 3 lines of code that's actually used in that and just put those on the page and take this whole big script away.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's your new best friend, code coverage. So I think that's pretty much all of the questions. And so we're gonna finish up now. So thank you all for coming. If you've followed along with the entire e-commerce SEO auditing series, that is now a wrap. But you will be the first to hear about our upcoming free trainings and webinars via email. And just to remind you, do check your emails for the recording of this session because it will include your series certificate, which is always nice to share on socials with your network. Sophie, thank you so much again from all of us, both at Sitebulb and also at Women in Tech SEO. Goodbye and hope to see you all again soon.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye.